Hello, and welcome to a presentation on Facebook. This is the Business, Finance, and Strategy, current as of early December 2015. My name is Ben Tyson, and I welcome you to this short 5-slide presentation. First, you may be wondering, well, what is Facebook? When I'm talking about Facebook, what's included? Because it's much more than the social media network that many of us in the United States have known and often used since the mid-2000s, since it was started in 2004 by Mark Zuckerberg, famously, with dubious origins. So they use a vertical integration strategy at Facebook Incorporated, which is why that $40 billion company has a few different subsidiaries we should discuss. So Internet.org is recently the main focus for Zuck. At least it sure seems that way if you check out facebook.com/Zuck, which is where the CEO posts his updates and announcements to the world. So Internet.org is an initiative because Facebook feels that they've now had so many people get online. The world's population is just over 7 billion. So that means 4 billion people in the world still do not have internet access. And Facebook now has everybody that's going to be online and use Facebook as of today. They've got everybody. It's a 1.55 billion person network at this point. So they've got everybody they're going to get. Now, the next piece of it is what about those 4 billion folks who don't yet have Facebook accounts? Well, Zuck has been focused on that for some time now. And Internet.org is his initiative where what they do is work with companies like OneWeb, SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, and even Google to launch satellites that are suborbital, or they hover, but still within the atmosphere of the Earth, or they're beyond the Earth's atmosphere, and they are in space. And those satellites beam internet signal down to areas where there wouldn't be any internet otherwise. So Internet.org has given internet access so far to 15 million users. And for every 10 people with Internet.org who has access, Zuck says that one person is lifted from poverty and another person has a new job, that a job was created. So for 15 million users, we could say that that's a really big deal, right? That means 1.5 million people have been lifted from poverty and 1.5 million jobs have been created. So that's amazing. But that's just the start, right? Because how can you become a user of any of the Facebook offerings if you don't have internet? So that's really step one in their vertical integration strategy. Now, step two is WhatsApp. And for those of us in the United States, we realize WhatsApp is not popular. And that's fine. In areas like the US, it is not popular. But where it is popular is in areas that internet is new, or people are communicating with mobile phones, using Wi-Fi in local hotspots, and they may not have internet access where they live or work. So for these folks, WhatsApp is a daily thing. They're texting, they're making phone calls, and it's all happening through an app that costs $0 for the first year and $1 each year after that. So that's amazing. It's amazing. In the first 4 years, WhatsApp just exploded, and the growth rates were about 8 times Facebook. So by the 4th year, they had 455 million people actively using WhatsApp, which is amazing. And they're coming up on 1 billion users soon. So, hey, enough about that. So Facebook, we know Facebook now has 1 billion active users per day on mobile alone. Just mobile, right? They have 1.55 billion folks as of November 2015 who are using Facebook through a desktop computer. So for every 1 out of 5 web pages that's viewed in the United States, 1 is a Facebook page. Fascinating, right? So Instagram, for teens, they don't want to use Facebook because their parents are on it and it's not cool. But Instagram is cool. So we see a lot of folks on Instagram. We'll get into the statistics in the coming slides. But for those folks who are just too cool for Facebook and they're just too connected to the internet, too plugged in for WhatsApp, they've got Instagram, and that's pretty good too. That's around 400 million users on that actively. So then we have Zuck, the iconic world leader, and look out, Iron Man, Elon Musk, because here comes Zuck, and Mark Zuckerberg is a genius computer science billionaire philanthropist. So that's amazing, right? So all the above items are working well for Facebook in their vertical integration strategy, and all should continue. The flow chart here demonstrates exactly how the whole system works. So in the beginning, it's internet.org, then it goes to WhatsApp, and then the user continues developing their internet. They might have more broadband now, even at home, right? That's even better. That might be internet.org as well. Then they use the classic Facebook or possibly Instagram. Now there's something coming down the road. It's outside of the scope of this presentation, but in 10 years, Facebook will have what they call the latent search engine, where in the initial indexing of this thing, they had over 1 trillion insights and connections. That's amazing, right? The whole point of Facebook is to make the world more connected. So what they're saying is, Google, now we ask the phone or we ask Siri on iPhone, what are some restaurants nearby? And we get an answer. But with Facebook's latent search engine, in 10 years, you'll be more likely, according to Zuck, that in 10 years, you'll be more likely to use Facebook to ask a question like a restaurant recommendation, because Facebook, you could say, where do my friends like to eat around here? Or I'm hungry for Thai food. What would my friends recommend? And Facebook has those insights and connections from people's check-ins, from maybe geolocating where they are, and any messages they've sent or videos they've posted or things for the restaurant pages or dishes that they have liked. And Facebook may ask them to rate a certain meal, certain entree, a number of stars, and they'll be able to work from your past history as well. So that latent search engine would give you precise information that's much more likely to be applicable for you, the individual, and your personalized needs than just something for your zip code or area code, because that type of search, while amazing in 2015 for many folks, is archaic if you look at where search engines and search engine capabilities are going, even in 10 years. All right, so Porter's 5-force analysis can teach us a little bit about markets. I don't want to talk too much about this, but I'll show you what I think should continue. Now, the threat of new entry, it's low because the entry conditions to be Facebook at Facebook's level are high, high, high. We're talking Silicon Valley, big investors, and even folks like Twitter, LinkedIn. It ain't gonna happen. They're not catching Facebook. They're not even coming close. So we're looking at around $16 billion companies, right, for Twitter and LinkedIn, whereas Facebook's already cracked 40 billion. So they're really not even close. Now, you've got the supplier power. I recommend that Facebook will continue to use that preemptive strategy to make a monopoly with WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, with threats to new entry, internet.org is a fascinating group. So it's hard to get into that field as well. You see they're collaborating across multiple companies. So it takes us to buyer power. Top right, continue the free model because end users don't pay for service and they love that. And continue the growth strategy in vertical integration. That's working very, very well. And continue revenue from business advertisements. Facebook's been able to generate quite a bit of revenue from these business advertisements, and it's what's called a direct response model. So when Facebook has a person advertising their life coaching services or their new baseball caps that say St. Louis teachers rock, to borrow from Gary Vaynerchuk, then you have these results that determine whether that user will spend more money on advertising through Facebook again. And that's the eat what you kill, sink or swim situation that Facebook's facing with their contingencies for the marketing and attracting folks who sign up to pay for advertising. And that's working quite well for Facebook, and I advise them to continue. Now, threat of substitution. I recommend continue vertical integration to avert this whole ageism thing. There was a 15% drop when Facebook announced there was a slight decrease in the additional users in the teenage category. So people were saying, well, boy, Facebook's system, it's not sustainable. Teenagers aren't signing up for it. But you know who is signing up for it? Folks who get into that college age, 20, 21, 22, they are signing up for it. But what's happening instead is that the teens are signing up for 2 networks in the US. And I'm speaking explicitly about the United States for that 15% drop. That was a US announcement, not the rest of the world. But what happened was the teens who weren't on Facebook were signing up for Instagram instead, because their 2 most popular networks for teens are Snapchat, which Facebook does not own, and Instagram, which Facebook does own. So there you go. So continue, because it's working well. And consider the sub-level features for private forums and groups. That might sound like a mouthful. It's a very technical point, but I'm bringing this up because there are, for example, in behavior analysis, we have 100,000 professionals, and we want to communicate about sensitive issues. But where do we do that? Well, rather than go and try to make a big network that would have privacy settings and give us the ability to make forums and groups to communicate, what people do, it's not the best way, but it's what happens now, is that people just use Facebook for that. So we don't really have a verification system, and we don't have enough control over how these forums and groups work. So they don't really function like a bulletin board we can police. So you have people who are informal. It's kind of like the Wild West days, where you'll get someone who's the president of the National Association, and they'll jump on the comment thread. Oh no, hold on, gotta blow the whistle on this one, folks. This is wrong. Here's a news or an article from a peer-reviewed journal explaining why. So you get that kind of thing. So I think that a network like ResearchGate, or something that hasn't come out yet for a very specific niche, is a threat to Facebook. Anyhow, let's look at culture practices. Continue. Here is a chart of the social network users from November 2015. All right, and here we are worldwide. All right, so Facebook with 1,550 million users active. WhatsApp, 900. Facebook Messenger, 700. Instagram, 400. Well, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Is there overlap? Yes, of course there is. But look at these numbers. Facebook altogether totals up to 3.55 billion active users on its 4 main networks as of November 2015. That's amazing. Amazing. So that's incredible. Now, you'll see a couple other items on there that you recognize and some that you don't. For example, QQ, Qzone, WeChat, Baidu Tieba, some of these, Sina, Weibo, well, I don't even know what these are, some of them, because we don't see them in the United States. But the ones that are backed with that revenue model that do pose a threat to Facebook are Twitter, and Skype is owned by Microsoft. Snapchat is on there, 200 million active users per month, and most of them, as we said, are teens or even preteens. Pinterest at 100, and LinkedIn in last place with 97 million active users. Now, you don't see Google Plus on there, do you? Well, there might be some reasons for that. Google Plus really comes under fire for how many active users there are, because people who are quote unquote using Google Plus might not be consciously using it. It just happens to, something gets posted in a certain location and the user may not realize it. So a lot of folks don't even understand. I'm one of them. I really don't even understand what Google Plus is and is not. I don't get it. So that's where Google's not listed on this diagram, but they do have a network. So anyhow, this is what you see. Facebook at the top is just absolutely dominating. Now, financial practices. Here's where I don't say continue, as I've said before. Do I think Facebook's doing a lot of things right? Absolutely, I do. But when it comes to financial practices, I say it's a yellow flag. Yellow flag. I think a checkered flag for Zuckerberg and his vertical integration strategy for Facebook and his mission to get people in the world more connected, but it's a yellow flag for the company financials, and here's why. Look at 2014, September 30th on the right. Then look at December 31st, 2014. What do you notice in that big yellow flag zone? Let's see. Well, we went from 2 billion to almost 18 billion. What happened? Now, how is that a goodwill asset? Well, look at the top. And you'll see that little icon that says WhatsApp, because that's when Facebook purchased, famously, WhatsApp, and they overpaid for it by 18, well, some would say maybe 16.9. Total bill on that whole thing altogether, lawyers' fees, everything figured all to the top, was almost 22 billion, so $21 billion range for WhatsApp. And then the folks on the WhatsApp talent team, the CEO was brought into the board of directors for Facebook, and then they merged and brought in some of those talent into the umbrella of what Facebook does, because WhatsApp is clearly a highly effective team. So they kept them together. Now, goodwill, that's a questionable item, because some folks from the SEC would say that goodwill should not be considered an asset. It should actually be considered a liability, because the goodwill is the price Facebook paid for and above the actual value of a company. So it's an expense, right? So it's interesting. It's like if I bought a $100,000 Mercedes, and instead of that being an expense on my balance sheet or my checking account, what if that went in as an asset? That's really strange to think about, right? Or if my friend said, hey, do you want to buy this computer from me? And it's worth about $500. And I said, you know what? I'll give you $5 million for it. And then as soon as I did, the bank said, wow, look at this. He's got an asset. Ben has $5 million in assets that just showed up. Wouldn't that be amazing? But it would be really strange, and it sounds absurd to talk about it that way. Although one might argue that that's exactly what happened with Facebook, and paying that much extra for WhatsApp has become an asset for them on the books. Now, how do they get away with that? Is that okay? Is it wrong? Yeah, well, it is okay, and they are doing it. What's the legal requirement if they do make that choice? And this is part of the GAAP, or Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, is to perform what's called goodwill impairment. And if that analysis shows that the purchase and the financial stability of Facebook as a result of that purchase is sound, then the company is able to proceed with that. But if there is an issue with goodwill impairment, then they have a responsibility to provide that information to shareholders so they can make an informed choice about what they'd like to do with their shares. Here we go. So now, when it comes to leadership, this is my last slide, folks. I say continue. Zuckerberg, oh boy, how are you going to hate the guy when, here's what he's putting out there. Look, 2013, he was the #1 highest rated CEO by Glassdoor. This took a lot of people by surprise. He had 99% approval rating in 2013. The year after, he dropped to 93%, which means he was still among the highest rated tech CEOs. So check this out. Now, on the left-hand side, you'll see a statement. It's from one of his employees, Amir Mimon, and he said, talking about Zuckerberg, he was the biggest donor of 2013, a minimalist, clearly committed to internet.org, even though that's not necessarily where the short-term revenue increases are. we really feel he wants to change the world for the better. He is dead focused on making the world more open and connected. The guy doesn't waver. All the investments in R&D and acquisitions have been along these lines. He wears t-shirts and jeans, talks with humility, and he just seems generally very approachable. We like that. So that's what they're saying about Mark Zuckerberg. Now, here's a collection of photographs I clipped from his Facebook wall, and I encourage you to check out facebook.com/Zuck, Z-U-C-K, and see what he's up to. He's a fascinating leader. And he says here that his daughter, who is named Max, was born to he and his wife, Priscilla Chan. And he posted, along with this photograph, he posted an open letter to her explaining that because he wants her to live in a world where people have more experiences and are more connected, he's creating a system where his shares, he and his wife, their shares of Facebook, which now come out to about $45 billion in value, will be put into a separate entity and used to fund initiatives. And some may be charitable and nonprofit, some may be for-profit, but it will be that money, all that money will be used to fund organizations that are future-oriented. And that's fascinating if you think about it, because Zuck wants the world he lives in to be a better place, and he feels it's not enough to make a lot of money and grow the company to his own level. He wants to see that the world becomes a better place for his child, and when his daughter goes on to perhaps have children, as she may, that it will become a better place for her as well. So it's really hard to dislike someone who is so young and successful, but also so humble, so focused on his vision, which is benevolent and humanitarian by nature. And now to have a child and on his first day as a father holding his baby, he's already, with his wife, they've already created a system to donate $45 billion to organizations that will grow and to help foster development of the human species. And that's incredible. It's incredible. So besides, how are you going to dislike someone who is on their Facebook wall posting pictures of his wife and newborn baby and this puppy? Now let's talk about Beast over here on the right. You might be wondering, what is that ball floating in the air? Well, that's a dog. That's Mark Zuckerberg's dog. And he says here, in the spirit of this holiday weekend, this is from Thanksgiving 2015, this is of course hot off the press, I want to share the most joyful photo of Beast jumping I've ever seen. Even after living with this guy for 5 years, seeing him bounce around still makes me smile. I hope your holiday weekend has been joyful too. So there we go. 687,682 people had liked that photo by the time I got to it, which was a couple days ago. So there we have it, folks. How do we hate someone like that? Well, some folks have seen the Social Network movie, and I think the tagline on that was, you don't get to 500 million friends without making a few enemies. And it is true that there were some lawsuits and a scandal over the origins of Facebook. But let's go back to what I said about the 10-year thing with latent search. Now, Facebook has a powerful vision, and they believe that in 10 years, they'll have the #1 latent search engine. It'll be better than Siri and Apple and better than Google. They also believe that they can get a lot more people connected on the internet. They want to get everybody in the world to have internet access through internet.org. So between that, WhatsApp, which is basically free, $1 for the second and third year, it's amazing, and they're on forever, and Facebook, which doesn't cost money to use, these are all ways to connect the human species. And then backing that with the financials for his daughter, I think it's amazing. I want to go back to the point of goodwill impairment, because in the short term, that is an issue. If the goodwill impairment analysis shows some red flags, then in that case, shareholders may pull out. Also, shareholders will probably pull out if Facebook announces more drops in the number of users in the teen sector, because that's a very big issue for US investors. But what I hope is that Facebook will counterbalance that by differentiating between Facebook, the network, and Facebook, the company, which has Instagram within the umbrella of offerings. So with that vertical integration strategy, I think Facebook has so many checkered flags, and I can't wait to see what this organization does in the next 10 years. When I started this presentation or this research at the start of our semester, my initial feeling of Facebook was that I strongly disliked Zuckerberg and I hated using Facebook, and I didn't have reasons really for that, but it was just my personal belief. And as I looked into facts and tried to understand what Facebook was doing and how it compared to other networks, I have to say I was absolutely converted, and now I've had my fair share of the Facebook Kool-Aid. So I'm definitely planning on purchasing some Facebook stock in the near future, although I don't own any at this time. And I'm really excited to see what Facebook will do from here on out. Thank you, folks. I really appreciate it. And I'd love to hear from you to get your points. If you've been with me through this whole presentation, thank you. I know it's very hard to focus attention that long these days. It's just it's very difficult to find that attention resource. But if you are still here and you are still listening, I'd like to ask you a question and see if you could tell me your opinion. What I'd like to know is, what do you think about that latent search? What do you think about that? Would you ask Facebook for restaurant recommendations based on what your friends and people around you say they like? What do you think about that? Fascinating, right? Interesting company. All right, folks, I'll talk to you later. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you again. Have a great semester.